The First Blood movie franchise has always been a little confused. Part flashy action spectacle, part self-serious meditation on war, the 5 movies in this series seem like they can't really make up their minds, stylistically, or even in their titles. And as Sylvester Stallone's muscles grow over the course of the franchise,
You are strong.
so does the myth of this character. And the size of his machine guns. And the number of explosions. And how clumsily all of that tough guy energy is mixed with an earnest attempt to make a point.
For our country to love us as much as we love it.
Tonal inconsistency like that is hard to pull off, which helps explain why every installment after the original was mostly panned by critics. But let me tell you where the critics got it wrong, and why you need to see 2008's Rambo.
But this is what we do. Who we are.
By 2008, the character of John Rambo had been gone from film for 20 years. So, to understand this character, we need to go back. The last time we saw him, he was in Afghanistan, where the country had apparently run out of shirts. So, Rambo fought helicopters shirtless. And wrestled shirtless. Rode horses shirtless. And played with sticks shirtless. There was a time when Rambo did own a shirt. In the original First Blood, he even had a jacket. A lot was different about him in the beginning. Specifically the fact that he seemed to have hope. But that didn't last long.
Delmar's gone.
What?
He died. Cancer. Brought it back from Nam.
And it only gets worse after he meets the local sheriff.
We don't want guys like you in this town.
We understand that the people back home don't want to be reminded of the Vietnam War, or the kids they sent to be killed or become killers there. So when Rambo refuses to leave town, things escalate quickly. We see him flash back to past trauma. He becomes an older version of himself. One that almost seems called into the forest, where he spends the rest of the movie running from the cops and picking them off, one by one. Compared to the rest of the franchise, the action that happens in the original First Blood is exciting but grounded, and it leads to an emotional climax.
Over. Nothing is over. Nothing. You just don't turn it off. It wasn't my war. You asked me, I didn't ask you. And I did what I had to do to win, but somebody wouldn't let us win.
The lack of score in this sequence echoes a greater emptiness here, as Rambo realizes that winning was never the point, either in this town or back in the jungle. It was only ever about survival. But the franchise didn't linger on that dour note for long. The second and third movies are completely different. They're more polished and blasty. The anti-war messages are still here, but they feel shoehorned in. These are popcorn movies, soundtracked by cheesy 80s rock ballads. Then the franchise was abandoned for 2 decades. And so it was fair to wonder what Stallone, who co-wrote all the past Rambo films but was newly stepping into the director's chair for the 4th installment, had to say about this character in 2008 that hadn't been said already.
Live for nothing. Or die for something.
At the start of Rambo, our hero is living a quiet life in Thailand. He reluctantly agrees to ferry a group of missionaries into a Burmese war zone, they get kidnapped, and he returns to save them. Pretty simple. But the substance is in the subtext. Rambo reinvents this franchise by giving it a new, grittier look. stripping away the 80s gloss, and most importantly, making it really, really gory. Unlike in the sequels before it, the violence in Rambo is uncool and not fun. It makes us cringe, and that's the point. From the original First Blood, this character has symbolized the trauma of war and its destructiveness. Now, by zeroing in and showing us all of this bloodshed, it's almost as if Stallone is shaming us for ever celebrating violence on film in the first place, which makes Rambo 4 a commentary on 3 and 2. The action in those films is violent, but glorified, never visceral. But we feel it here. And that could be one reason why critics dismissed it. Rambo had a lot working against it on its release in 2008. For one, bad remakes. Reviving old IP was all the rage in the early 2000s. And most remakes were pretty rough. Another big trend of the early 2000s was a horror movement known as torture porn, which saw horror films get progressively meaner, more brutal, and generally more disgusting. Rambo isn't a horror movie, but it would have been easy to see it as lazily riding the same stylistic wave, especially since it was rebooting a long-dormant property. But rather than just rehashing old ideas, Stallone rewrites what this character stands for in Rambo, and a lot of that has to do with the movie's wince-inducing approach to gore. Unlike in a lot of horror porn, Stallone uses our repulsion against us to make a point stylistically that this franchise was never quite able to nail before. No!
What did you do? We came here to help stop the killing. Who are you to tell?
Who are you?
Let him go!
Do the ends justify the means? Is there such thing as a fun anti-war film? Is this character even a hero? I think Stallone would answer yes. He is a hero. But kind of a monstrous one. For maybe the first time in this franchise, the movie's form matches its function. The gore here isn't a cheap trick. It's Stallone's secret weapon. And it matches with the movie's overall heightened aesthetic. The war zone these characters inhabit is a stand-in for hell. The villains are demonic and one-dimensional. And Rambo, who's mostly wordless now, almost animal, is less a soldier than he is an idea. Call it vengeance or justice. Someone who gave up on being a full person a long time ago.
Nothing does change.
Of course it does. Nothing stays the same.
And that's just it. It wouldn't be a story without change. So by the end of Rambo 4, just like in Rocky V, which we'll discuss and defend in a future video, Stallone returns this character to a place that seemed impossible before. His roots. He's back in the States and back to walking in jeans and an army jacket. But most importantly, he's back to hoping again that at the end of this road, he'll meet someone from his past who might remind him of who he was back then, before everything got so bloody and bleak. It's a long walk, but Stallone the filmmaker lingers on it longer than any other shot in the film. In spite of everything, he wants us to believe that it's possible for Rambo, and maybe for us too, to go home again.